Hello everyone, and welcome to a super fun video. So the last few days, we've been counting down the best March of the Machines cards for various constructed formats, and today, it is finally modern day. And once again, I'm joined by Crim to talk about these cards. How are you today, Crim?
I'm good. I'm excited. Brand new set as always, and this set is looking extra cool when it comes to flavor. But let's see if flavor actually affects modern.
Yeah, we were honestly talking about this before we started recording the video, and I think we were both kind of like, we had to stretch a little bit to fill out our list with 10 cards that will be good in modern. So admittedly, there's some kind of long shots on here that we'll see. They could have implications, but I think this is not a Modern Horizon set or something that just has a list of like, wow, here's a whole bunch of stuff that's gonna like really shake up the format. Hopefully there's a few good role players and a few sleepers that if things break right, they could be good, but it'll be interesting to talk about anyway. But before we get into that, a couple of reminders. One is, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor, Card Kingdom, over at cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. And number two, this is a hybrid of a list I made and one Crim made. If you want to see our individual lists, you can check them out over on the website. I'll link the article in the description to this video. Anyway, let's count down the top 10 modern cards from March of the Machines. And at number 10 on our list, we got a battle in Invasion of Ravnica. In this one, I'm mostly excited about because I think it's actually a pretty good colorless removal spell. Colorless removal is not great in general. Historically, if you're trying to exile something in your colorless, you're paying like 7 mana for Scour from Existence or whatever. Invasion of Ravnica exiles anything that's not exactly 2 colors for just 5 mana, which for colorless is actually not the end of the world. The backside, if you get to it, it really wants 2 color decks. But my thinking with this card, Crim, is we got some colorless or mostly colorless decks like Eldrazi Tron or Tron that can make a lot of mana but don't really get good removal. Could you see this card maybe showing up, getting some Tron threats or something?
Hold on. Did you just say Tron?
Yes.
Do people play Tron anymore?
Hopefully not.
I'm gonna be the first person. I'm gonna be the first person to tell you this. I hate Tron. I know you hate Tron.
But
yes. My God, do I think that Tron is like actually extremely underpowered.
I mean, Tron, it's not what it used to be. There was a time where it was really good, but mono green Tron, it's still like a tier 2 deck that you see on occasion. I don't know. Would you play a copy there?
I mean, yeah, okay. If I were to play, if I were the brave soul that were to sleeve up Tron, yes, I would play this. That's for sure. That is for sure.
What about
I never thought this. This might be the newest like team up I didn't expect, and it's not Torbaran and Rankle. It's me and Tron.
You and Tron.
I'm feeling bad for Tron right now, and I never thought I would. And I don't like this card is cool, but I don't know if it's putting Tron on the map.
No, I don't think it's gonna change the fortunes of Tron, and I don't want to change the fortunes of Tron. I would prefer them to remain bad and no one to play them. But I don't know. Are there any other implications like 5 mana?
I mean,
5 mana exile anything? Is there any? What about? I don't know. Where else could this be good?
Titan want this? I mean, they make a silly amount of mana.
They do make a silly amount of mana.
And this shuts off a Blood Moon, or it removes a Blood Moon, right?
That is an upside.
Oftentimes, this is a thing that, like, maybe a deck that loses or gets hosed by Blood Moon can make a ton of mana. So that's Tron and Titan. Titan, however, is actually a playable deck, and I think very good. So, yeah, like, I think... I don't know. Yeah, like maybe there because they do make a hilarious amount of mana.
What about the backside? Is there any chance we're trying to flip this? Like the backside, it can draw a ton of cards if you're casting 2 color spells, but we're not playing Pioneer. There's no Niv deck. I don't even know like exactly where you'd put it, and it seems like it's only 4 defense counters, but still, like, it's a lot of effort to take in, like, play this for 5 mana, and then the next turn try to attack it to get a 5/5. We're playing Modern, there's so much, like, free removal running around that I assume if this does make it, it's gonna mostly be as a sorcery, right? You're not trying to flip into Guildpact Paragon.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Guild-Pack Paragon sounds like something I would need to flip in the event of, like, back when, like, I don't know, if you took all of Ad Nauseum's ways to, like, win the game, so they had to just, like if you, like, extract Ad Nauseum and they had to play, like, Simeon's Spirit Guide and attack you. Like, this is, like, what it feels like. So I don't think we're gonna see Guild-Pack Paragon all that much. And I guess if we do, like, props to that. I guess
it's like Dredge casting Narcomoeba and Golgari Thug, like that type of plan. Like, things have gone horribly wrong if you're flipping into this.
When Dredge started to cast their Narcomoebas, that's where we are, you know, and that's what Guild-Pack Paragon feels like. More so you're doing it for the front side.
Well, let's move on. Number 9 on our list. Crim, we got a new sword, a blue-black sword, Sword of Once and Future. This card really intrigues me. It seems powerful. It surveils too. Lets you cast a cheap instant or sorcery from your graveyard for free every single turn as you're getting in hits, and you get protection from black. Is this card good in 2023 though? Like, I don't know. Are swords good in 2023?
I'm gonna be very real with you here. I love this card in that it looks cool. It finishes out the cycle. Its name though is close to what is probably is going to be accurate, and it's sort of getting casted once in the future, and that's because it is going to be casted probably only once, and it might be by me forcing it, because I do like the card. I think the card is fun. In Modern, it is a format where you have the most like 2 mana or less spells that you can get, right? Like, sure, if swords are randomly making their way into Rhino decks, you know what I mean? Like sure, like, why not? But do I want to cast this and like cast an AV, Ancestral Visions? Yes, I do. Or is it Recall? Whichever one has to spend. I don't remember. But like, yeah, like that card. This Modern is a format where you have a lot of this, and Stoneblade doesn't quite exist here like it does in Legacy. So like, this is more. I feel like this is a Legacy sword, right? Is this more of a Legacy sword?
It might be more of a Legacy sword. I think this card's really powerful. I think this, personally, and maybe I'm off base, I think this is like Sword of Fire and Ice level powerful, assuming you have a deck that meets its requirements. Like, the challenge is, sword decks usually need a lot of creatures to wear the sword, but then this also needs enough spells to get value from casting them for free from your graveyard. So there's a bit of a tricky requirement to meet, but I think that this is like a legitimately powerful card. I guess I'm just a little skeptical of swords in general, because they just really don't show up in Modern anymore. Like, everyone's playing Colossus Hammers and Cauldron Completes. You don't really see swords. You don't really see Batter Skulls even that much anymore. Like, kind of the iconic equipment from a decade ago just don't really hold up today. So I think this card's strong. I love the idea of recasting free spells and rhinos, but I don't know. Like, I've come to believe that swords are just a little too slow for the current era of Magic.
Well, it's time for you to prove that wrong on Against the Odds or something. Okay?
Against Odds? Wow. Who would have thought we'd be talking about swords as Against Odds cards? Like, these cards used to be so good. They're so iconic. Like, it's crazy, but I think that's where we are. Well, let's keep moving on. Next on our list, we got an easy one. OZOLITH, the Shattered Spire. It's a Hardened Scales, except it's an artifact, and you pay 1 more mana, and you can cycle it, and it can potentially put counters on things. So a whole bunch more text than the actual Hardened Scales. Hardened Scales is a legit Modern deck, not tier 1 right now, but it has been, like, at various points a tier 1 deck, and it's still a relatively heavily played deck. I think this is worse than Hardened Scales, Crim, in Modern. Like, it does way more, but it's 1 more mana, and it's legendary, which is the other thing. You can't stack it up. How do you think this shakes out in Modern? My guess is this is like Hardened Scales 5 and 6 or something for the Hardened Scales deck. Would you replace your Hardened Scales with this, or just play a couple on top of it?
I mean, I'm definitely not replacing the Hardened Scales, because Hardened Scales is non-legendary, so...
Yeah.
But... I mean, yeah, I think this is like 5 and 6. I don't think you run more than 2 copies if you're playing Hardened Scales, right? Just because it's nice to have a Hardened Scales 5 and 6, and on top of that, with some additional text on top of it, why not? Right? Like, I think this card is pretty decent. It's pretty decent, because it itself adds the counter, too. So, you know, I kind of like it. And when you're already, well, like, the lists run like maybe 3 OZOLITH as is, maybe shave one of those OZOLITHs and play one of these, or 2 of these. Shave a welding jar and an OZOLITH, and there you go. 2 copies of OZOLITH, the Shattered Spire. Yeah, and I think this is just a natural shoo-in for that deck.
Yeah, I'm exactly where you are. I think a copy or 2 makes a lot of sense. I think it's not quite as good as actual Hardened Scales, but it is worth noting that you can always sacrifice. So if you do like play 2 and draw both somehow, you can always sack the first one to Ravager. And I do like that.
Yeah.
It gives you something to do if you have nothing going on. Hardened Scales decks are almost like affinity decks in that they can usually dump their hand really, really quickly, and then they end up playing off the top of their deck if the game's still going. Having this like mana sink where you just tap it and put 1 or 2 or 3 counters on something, depending on how many Hardened Scales effects you got, like, that doesn't seem like the end of the world. That is a nice little bonus there. It's not your primary game plan, but it is an upside. So seems like a nice new addition to Hardened Scales. Next up, this card is made on every single one of our lists. Invasion of GOBAKHAN. So the White Thoughtseize battle. Crim, what do we think about this one in Modern? So there are like humans decks and white weenie decks. That's been kind of a hot topic in Modern recently. The Shining Shoal mono white human aggro deck. Is this fast enough for Modern though? Modern is a pretty fast format. 2 to cast. Then you gotta flip it. What do you think? How does this one work in the Modern format?
I mean, isn't that exactly why you love it? Because Modern's a fast format. This can slow it down a little bit. Maybe pick a combo piece off. Take one of those elementals and, because like they would have to. So, curious here. If you take an elemental, let's just say I exile your FAERIE with this. Are you now exiling a red card from your hand to evoke it and paying 2?
Ooh, I believe so, yes. I believe you would still have to pay the tax.
Yes, then this is great, right? Because you have the Death and Taxes decks running around as well. That's like a fringe archetype, but still exists, right? Whether it's the Boros variant or the Orzhov variant, there are Taxes decks running around, and this can play that. And of the battles, this is the cheapest one to cast and the lowest defense loyalty. So, I don't know. I think this, if there is a battle to make it this has got to be one of them, right? There's already white aggro like decks. There's white weenie decks. There's Taxes decks. So there's a home for this, and those decks now can double up. Like the Taxes decks can go Thoughtseize and a few copies of Invasion of GOBAKHAN. So why not? They can really slow down a game plan now. And
yeah, I mean. Effect. It is a lot of disruption. It also synergizes with Drannith Magistrate, which does see a bit of play in Modern. So you get a little extra synergy there. I think in Modern, in Standard and Pioneer, I see this as a main deck card. In Modern, I wonder more if it's going to be a main deck card or a sideboard card where you bring it in where the matchup is right, against combo, against control, and you'd rather just have another threat in your main deck. So it'll be interesting to see. So I think it definitely is playable in Modern, but just where it fits, whether it ends up being a card that you're trying to cast on turn 2 every game, or if it's something you're bringing in the right matchups, I think that has yet to be determined. But this is a pretty unique effect for white, I would say. The only other issue with this in Modern is you do have actual Elite Spellbinder. It is 1 more mana, but I guess you could just mash those all together and have a pretty disruptive mono white deck. Almost a mono white deck that almost plays like a Black Thoughtseize deck, which is kind of an interesting thing that we haven't had before.
Yeah. You could be a very annoying deck. So yeah.
Well, let's keep moving on. Next up, we got another battle, an Invasion of IKORIA. Invasion of IKORIA. This one's on my list for one reason. So most decks that want Finale of Devastation will still want Finale of Devastation. I think there's 2 big Finale of Devastation decks in Modern. One is Asmore combo. One is Devoted Druid combo. You can't really play Invasion of IKORIA because Asmore is a human and Vizier Remedies is a human, but this card does do something really interesting, which is combo with Vampire Hexmage. So Crim, tell me if this is good enough for Modern. The idea is basically turn 1 you play a Mana Dork, turn 2 do whatever, turn 3, 4 mana, cast this, get Vampire Hexmage, flip into an 8/8. So you get an 8/8 Trample Reach on turn 3 that gives your team evasion. That's got to be good enough for Modern, right? Like, it's an 8/8 on turn 3. Or are we in a world where that's not even, like, is that not even strong enough for Modern? Is Modern just too power crap for that to matter?
Think about everything that you just mentioned. You talked about, like, a bunch of things needing to happen, and then even then, I'm not gonna lie to you. You could do all of that, and then
4
have
mana
an
8/8. 4 mana 8/8, Crim.
I don't think I care. A 4 mana 8/8? A 4 mana 8/8?
That's a bummer.
Where also,
right?
by the way, where the rest of you're playing vampire hex mages. You're doing all these things. You're loading your deck up with so many bad cards that I don't think this makes it.
Okay, yeah, maybe.
4 mana 8/8 stuff. You know that's not good enough. You know that's not good enough.
I will say it's a little awkward that it is still 2 mana, even if you flip it, so it gets fatal pushed all the time, which is kind of sad, or like prismatic ending, even once you have the 8/8 out there. That is a little bit of a concern. I forgot. Yeah, the mana value thing.
The 4 mana 8/8 that is 2 mana value.
Honestly, okay, so here's what I actually think. Do I think we're gonna have a deck built around this combo? No. But could I imagine there being, okay, so there's like a Devoted Druid style deck that already wants Invasion of Ikoria to like find its combo pieces, and then you can play one copy of Vampire Hexmage as like your, okay, my main combo got shut down for whatever reason. Like, I might as well YOLO it and just like try to make an 8/8 and hope for the best. Like, that sounds practical, right? Just like having it be a side plan for a deck that already is playing Invasion of Ikoria for other reasons. It's only one slot. You got one slot for a Vampire Hexmage. That's all it takes. And then the Tortha, you get them, dodge that fatal push. GG, Modern players.
Is that enough? I mean, you know what? Sure.
Okay, we got there.
Sure.
All right, let's keep moving on. This one, Crim, I know you like this one. FAERIE Mastermind. FAERIE Mastermind, our new World Championship card. Flashing in, drawing cards, hating on your opponent for drawing extra cards. What are we thinking with this one in the Modern format, Crim?
It's Yuta Takahashi. It's got to be on a FAERIE Rogue. I love this. I think this card is probably the first card that I think genuinely will make it into Modern. Like, I think this card is, like, the others were, like, kind of like mere suggestions. Maybe things have to fall, the pieces have to fall a certain way. This card is just actually good. Like, I think this card is perfect in Modern.
So,
when you've got so many...
FAERIEs?
Like what?
Is that what? Is that where you're thinking as far as home?
You could play it in FAERIEs if you'd like. You could play it, I mean, obviously it would go great in FAERIEs, but there's lots of other, like, cheap, like, kind of flashy, like, kind of tempo-y archetypes. And I think this kind of can go in there. Like, you can go in a Phoenix deck if you wanted to. I know Phoenix at the time was really popular in Modern. I know, obviously, that kind of stopped being true after a certain point. But, like, I think that this could play in lots of flashy decks. I think this is a legitimately... Let me see here. I'm trying to pull up... Let's take a look at what like some of the most popular decks are. Unfortunately, hold on. Did my internet cut out?
So I know I can hear you. So hopefully your internet's good.
Okay.
We see FAERIEs on occasion, so I think that's the easiest home as you get the tribal synergies. There could just be like you could play it just as a tempo card, which I think that could be fine. But I'm trying to figure out like. Would you play this in just like a Snapcastery control style deck? Like something along those lines? Just jam it for... I mean, it's a 2/1 flash flyer. That's fine stats. It's getting in. It can trade with a Ragavan if you needed to, flash it in and block a Ragavan, which is relevant. So maybe there's enough upside to just play it in a generic sense. Like maybe you can just run it out there and like trust that it's going to be good enough, and then hopefully draw some extra cards along the way, which I mean that's never going to hurt. In some matchups that's going to be very relevant. Some decks are pretty consistently like churning through their deck and in casting cards that are drawing them extra cards, like, and you're going to be generating a ton of card advantage. So maybe you can just run it out there, like it hits on Ledger Shredder and stuff like that. So I don't know.
A deck that plays Ledger Shredder could play this, right? Like I think that any deck that is like, sure, if for the Brave Delver players that also exist out there, like, I mean, the big thing is, do you think blue-red, like the Murktide decks would play this?
The challenge is just like, they got so many busted Modern Horizons cards. Like, that's the challenge, is you're competing against like Murktide, Dragon Rage Channeler, Ragavan. So I mean, maybe, is there an argument for this being better than Ledger Shredder? I guess I would lean towards probably no, just because of the toughness aspect, but maybe you could play it in that slot and it would probably be fine in that slot.
Yeah, I think it would go. I think it could go in that deck as a 1 or 2 of.
What about Mill? Pay for you draw a card that's kind of like milling them, essentially. Yeah.
I actually think that could work. I think Mill is very, very much though a possibility. Actually, I kind of like it in Mill. Yeah, you know what? I think I kind of like it in Mill. To be honest with you, it's not bad there.
I mean, I think this is a card that's of a power level that we'll see play. Like, I'm not exactly sure what the home is, but when you just read this card, the combination of stats and abilities and somewhat relevant creature types, someone's going to find a use for this card. I think the floor is it shows up in fairy decks, and very rarely you see rogue decks in Modern, but it shows up in the decks that care about its creature type. But I think it has enough possibilities that you can try it in a lot of archetypes, and it will probably be pretty decent in just about anything. It's just like overall a pretty good Magic card.
You could even force an opponent's draw with like Baleful Mastery out of Mill. Oh
yes, get that combo kill. All right, let's move on. Number 4 on our list, we have the return of POLUKRANOS, and so this one's tricky. This is another one. It's like, where does this card fit exactly in Modern? I feel like it's a powerful card. Like, it's got decent stats. I want to say that its home is in mono green Stompy, but that just hasn't really been a deck in several years in Modern. It's kind of gotten power crept by Solitudes and all the free removal. It's a tough world to beat down with your Leatherback Balos in Modern. There's not really a Nykthos deck in Modern. I don't know. What do you think about this one, Crim? Like, I feel like this is another card that I think it's got a combination of stats and abilities where it could see play in Modern, but triple green is a pretty big cost, and I'm just not sure what home you put this in.
It has to be in a Nykthos deck, right? Because mono green Stompy doesn't exist. I mean,
Nykthos doesn't really exist. I mean, I have seen people who have basically just like, I'm going to play my Pioneer deck in Modern, and it does fine, but like, mono green Devotion is definitely not what it is in Pioneer and Modern. Like, you see it very rarely, like, as a rogue brew, but it's not a top tier archetype. So maybe this helps one develop. Maybe is this a card that could make it more likely that people start playing Nykthos in the format?
I think, like, the problem is I think this is a good card. And, like, I just don't know what home wants this, right? Because it is triple green as well. And if Nykthos doesn't exist, can this card exist? Because that's really its main purpose, right?
It is very good with Nykthos. What about some of the Titan decks? Like, mono green Amulet Titan. Like, your mana should be able to work. You ramp an absurd amount. Maybe this could be a sideboard card where it is a 4/5. It tangles pretty well with a lot of things in combat, and if you flip it, it's very strong, especially against aggro decks. Maybe that could be a home potentially as like a sideboard option.
Yeah, I like it there. I like it there because that deck is pretty much mono green, right? Like that's what it's doing. And and you're sideboarding it in against aggro basically,
like, yeah. Bring it
into
aggro
like exist. Like, I mean, Burn does.
Reach is a sneaky little upside against like Dragon Rage Channelers, Ledger Shredders. Like, it does kind of shut down the air pretty well. I'm not saying it's going to be a staple there or anything, but I think there's enough merit to consider it at least.
Yeah, and Titan is the one deck that I think, since Nykthos doesn't exist, Titan is pretty much like a super Nykthos deck, and it'll probably flip this more often than not. So yeah, you know what? I can see this coming out of the sideboard. It's actually pretty decent. It's a good creature. I just don't know what deck. Much like you know, the FAERIE that we had talked about. The world, like, it is of the power level of what Modern asks. It just needs a home.
Yeah, I feel very much the same way. Like, I think the card could definitely have implications. It just doesn't have an obvious home right away. So we'll see what people can come up with as they brew around it. But let's keep moving on. Next up, Knight-Errant of Eos, number 3 on our list. And this one I assume is kind of a mono-white human style card. We were just talking about this earlier. Mono-white humans has kind of been a thing recently in Modern. You got lots of cheap creatures. Yes. You can convoke this in, draw a couple cards. It feels like that is a pretty easy home. Plus, I mean, who knows? Maybe Modern is the format where Circle of Loyalty Knights takes off, Crim. It could finally be time.
We were wrong about it in Standard, but it's because it was meant for Modern. Legitimately, though, I do think this card is good just because this is exactly what you want in a Taxes deck, right? Because we had mentioned it before, and it is that it doesn't synergize well with soldiers in Standard. Do you want to break the legendary like synergies in Standard, all of that? But here, and much like in Pioneer, there's just vanilla white weenie aggro. Taxes decks are kind of the same way as well. So, like, this is kind of what you want, right? Like, this is exactly what you want. And a 5 mana 4/4, which doesn't really cost you 5 mana, I think that's exactly what you want when you can get 2 cards out of it. So yeah, I love this card in any of those decks, and it is really only meant for those decks. I would love to believe that Knights take off, but I just something about it just doesn't seem like it's gonna happen.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's kind of a white aggro / human style card / Taxes is an interesting home. You got lots of pieces you can find, Leonin Arbiters and Thalias and so forth you can find with its ability, which is nice. And plus, a lot of Taxes creatures, the cost of this card is essentially that you're giving up a turn of attacking to convoke out the Knight and draw some cards. But Taxes creatures, you're not playing Leonin Arbiter to like go beat downs most of the time. Like, it's not going to be doing that anyway. So the cost is pretty minimal. And I also just like the absurd value trains you can get going with this. Like, between this and Seasoned Pyromancer and Knight Captain of Eos, there's a ridiculous amount of card advantage where you can just kind of like build this huge board full of creatures. So I think it definitely has some uses in Modern for sure. Well, let's move on. Number 2 on our list, we have one of the cards that I'm highest on as far as actually being
I like this card.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one. So a Halo Forager, it kind of looks like a bad Snapcaster, except it has one really huge upside. And it's not that you can cast your opponent stuff, although that is an upside. But the way it's worded, it's a Snapcaster that can actually flashback no mana value spells. It can flashback, let's say, a Crashing Footfalls, or a Glimpse of Tomorrows, or a Living End. And I think that's what really sets this card apart for me. There's a lot of Cascade decks. One of the most popular things to do in Modern is just like, try to Cascade into Rhinos, try to Cascade into Living End. This is 3 mana, so it doesn't mess up your Cascades, and it seems perfect for those decks. You can Cascade into your Rhinos and then use this to flashback your Rhinos and make even more Rhinos. You can use it against your opponent's Rhinos. They make Rhinos and you're like, well, I'll just cast my Halo Forager, steal your Crashing Footfalls, make your Rhinos. Also works against Living End, which is one of the funniest parts of this card. Your opponent Living Ends and put all their stuff into play, and then you just cast this and cast their Living End to re-wrath the board. So that's what has me hyped about this card. I don't know if it's good enough. Why don't you tell me, Grim? Like, can you play this as a Snapcaster? Like, could you play this in FAERIES or something, the way they used to play Snapcaster? Is being sorcery speed in 3 mana too much of a drawback unless you have those specific synergies?
Yeah, it is. It being sorcery, there is one home, and it's the only home, and it's the one that you mentioned. Though how high you were, I thought you cracked it. I thought there was something like that I've been missing here. But like, yeah, it's just for free spells, like free Rhinos and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, the free spells in Modern is where this is going to be headed, right? Because you can't be doing like what 3 mana sorcery speed to get what? Like a Thoughtseize or something like that? That's
no.
4 mana to Thoughtseize somebody. That's not great. And then once you start moving past 1 mana spells, it gets even more comical. So, yeah, this is really a free spell card.
It is cute you get to steal your opponent's stuff. Like that's one of the most
Yes.
fun aspects of this card is being able to steal your opponent's graveyard. As far as like competitive modern implications, that's not like why you're playing the card, but I think it is cute that you can use it to steal your opponent's stuff.
Like, getting their bolt, not
Yes.
bad. Not bad.
Let's move on. Number 1 on our list. We got a Planeswalker, RENN and Realmbreaker topping our list today. Crim, what do you think this one does in the modern format?
Okay, RENN and Realmbreaker. Okay, it is of the power level of what you would expect for a modern Planeswalker. It's 3 mana, right?
I feel like we've said this about a lot of cards in our top. It is of the power level.
It is. It just needs the home, right? But I think this has a home. In that it goes well in Amulet Titan, right? Well, I guess like there are some spells that you could hit, but being able to get your amulet, being able to get any of your lands, you know what I mean? Like this feels like exactly where like what you'd want there. And on top of that, maybe even 4-color Omnath, because that fixes your colors. And on top of that, it already plays Wrenn and 6, so, you know, why not play the other Wrenn on top of that? So, like, it has homes already kind of here that are worth giving it a shot, right? Like, then there's maybe even a shot in Golgari, like the Golgari Yawgmoth decks.
Yeah,
like I think the
can see
Yawgmoth
that.
decks can play this as well. So there's already a few places I think I would want to try this right now. Like if I were playing this in Modern, those are the 3, like the few homes that I think I'd start with. The other cards that we had mentioned, they're of the power level, but they don't actually have a home. This one, I feel like has a home already, and we just need to figure out which one. So I don't know. What do you think?
There's definitely a lot of possibilities with the card. Like fixing the mana is relevant in some cases. Generating card advantage is nice. The land can be relevant in some scenarios. We mentioned like Indomitable Creativity is really powerful and popular in Modern. This is a way you can turn your land into something that you can sacrifice to Indomitable Creativity, which is another sneaky upside. So there's like Yawgmoth seems like a decent possibility. So there's many places. We'll have to really wait and see. Like on one hand, there's a ton of decks that could possibly play Wrenn and Realmbreaker. On the other hand, there's not one specific deck I can point to and be like, Wrenn and Realmbreaker is going to be the best card in that deck, or one of the best cards in the deck, or it's the reason to play that deck. So it's more a card that like, and maybe it's just the product of what the design is, that it kind of does a whole bunch of little things well. If your opponent plays a Blood Moon, this can come down and like save you by the timestamp thing of making all of your lands work again. If your opponent kills something important, you can potentially rebuild with the -2. So I think it's one of those value-y cards that just does so many little things well that someone will figure out a way to use it. I think it's going to be at its best in a deck that can take advantage of the graveyard, which kind of leads back around to some of the like Yawgmoth type synergies. So I think it'll be very interesting to see exactly where this lands. I gotta think there's going to be a deck that breaks it. I don't know which one of the decks on our list is going to be the one that makes this card like a Modern staple, but I'm pretty confident that one of them will.
Yeah, one of them's gotta give it a home.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of our top 10 Modern cards for March of the Machine. So let us know what you think. I think our overall takeaway was, oddly, March of the Machine's not the most push Modern set, but maybe we're missing some stuff. So if there's something we haven't seen, let us know. What do you think of this set for Modern? What are you most hyped about for Modern? Thanks for hanging out and talking about it, Crim. It's always a ton of fun.
Blast having you.
And thanks to everyone for watching. So this is our last top 10 video. Good news is we're going to have gameplay content starting soon. It's almost early access day, so keep an eye out on the YouTube over the next couple of weeks, and we will have a ton of new gameplay stuff featuring March of the Machine. So thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk to you soon.